It takes exactly 3 sentences to erase 5 years of loyalty. That's how long it took Adam Crane to end me. He sat across the polished glass table, tie perfectly straight, expression rehearsed. Behind him, the skyline of Austin shimmered in the morning sun, mocking me through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The man I'd once called my mentor didn't even look up when he spoke. He read from a sheet of paper like it was a grocery list. Performance inconsistency, creative misalignment, organizational restructure. Those were the 3 sentences. That was all it took. I remember the silence afterward, the way the HR manager's hands fidgeted with her pen, the way the air conditioner hummed louder than my heartbeat. I had built the foundation of this company from my apartment, written the first lines of code that made Hale systems worth something. And now I was being erased from my own creation. When I finally spoke, my voice didn't sound like mine. You can't launch the AI system without me. You know it's my work. Adam smiled like a man explaining gravity to a child. Ideas belong to the company, Ryan. You signed that. I hadn't signed away my soul. But that didn't matter. Security was waiting when I stepped into the hallway. My coworkers turned in their chairs, pretending to type, pretending not to see me carry the cardboard box that held the last 5 years of my life. A coffee mug, a sketch of the first system prototype, and a dying succulent I kept on the window ledge. Whispers followed me to the elevator. What happened? I thought he was a partner. Guess not. The doors closed, cutting off the sound, leaving only the reflection of a man who looked like a ghost. Outside, the Texas heat hit me like a punishment. I stood in the parking lot staring at the building's logo, my own last name, Hale, glowing in blue neon above the doors. My father used to say, "You'll know you've made it when your name's on the wall." I had, and now I was watching it belong to someone else. The drive home blurred past in a haze of anger and disbelief. I kept replaying Adam's face, calm and untouchable, as if betrayal were just business etiquette. In my apartment, I dropped the box on the kitchen counter and poured myself a drink, though it was barely noon. My laptop was still logged into the company server, one last access point before they shut me out. I clicked on the notifications out of habit, not hope. There it was, an automated email from the U.S. Patent Office. Your submission request has been successfully filed by CraneTech LLC. I scrolled down, and my stomach turned cold. The attached document contained my algorithm, line for line, my architecture, and my logic. Only one name sat in the inventor field, Adam Crane. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred, until the anger burned past pain into something colder. 5 years, 3 sentences, 1 theft, and somewhere deep down, a promise formed. This wasn't over. My name was gone. My idea wasn't. I sat in front of my laptop long after the sun dipped below the skyline, the only light in my apartment coming from the screen. The U.S. Patent Office site loaded slowly, almost reluctant to show me the truth I already felt in my gut. There it was, CraneTech LLC, patent ID 84219T, listed under Innovation in Predictive Workflow Automation. That was my system, my design, my late nights, my caffeine-fueled weekends, my code, only this time it was polished with Adam Crane's signature at the bottom like he'd birthed it himself. I clicked through the application, line after line of technical jargon I knew by heart. I could almost smell the stale coffee from those endless coding sessions, hear the hum of the old servers I'd begged the company to upgrade. Every sleepless night, every debug, every idea, they'd stripped my name from all of it. Emily sat on the couch behind me, legs tucked under a blanket, scrolling her phone. She'd been quiet all evening, watching me unravel in silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm. Too calm. "Ryan, you need to stop. You can't fight people like him." I turned, trying to process what she'd just said. "People like him? He stole from me." She sighed. "I know, but he's a CEO. He's got lawyers, PR, and money. You'll just end up broke and blacklisted. I'm saying this because I care about you." I wanted to yell, to tell her that caring meant standing beside someone, not telling them to quit. But the words stayed stuck in my throat. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was how the world worked. Power wins, truth gets buried, and the rest of us just move on. Still, sleep wouldn't come. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, every thought replaying like static. The day Adam first called me his right-hand man. The company parties where he'd brag about our innovation, always pausing before saying our. The night he said, "We're going to change the world, you and me." It wasn't just theft. It was betrayal dressed as mentorship. Around 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and turned the laptop back on. I opened the patent file again, scrolling through the technical documents. My cursor hovered over the source code reference tab. Normally, that part would be locked, just broad descriptions for reviewers. But Adam had made one mistake. He'd uploaded the actual code as a PDF for transparency. I zoomed in, my eyes scanning familiar logic blocks and patterns. That was my work, no doubt. And then I saw it, a comment line, deep in the core section. Hale Shadow DV3, optimize if schedule allows my tag, my personal note. The one I'd added months ago as a reminder to fix a minor bug. Nobody knew about it. Nobody but me. I leaned back, pulse racing. My proof, my fingerprint. A smile crept across my face for the first time in days. He'd stolen my idea, sure, but he'd also stolen my mistakes. And those he'd never be able to explain. The man who stole my idea just got named Innovator of the Year. I didn't plan to watch the ceremony. But when something defines your humiliation, you don't get to choose the reminders. It was on every feed, LinkedIn, YouTube, even the local business news ticker flashing Crane Tech, the future of work. I sat on my couch, half a bottle of whiskey gone, watching Adam Crane take the stage in a designer suit. He smiled the way only thieves and politicians do, like victory was his birthright. The crowd roared. Cameras flashed. The host introduced him as the visionary mind behind Hale Systems' breakthrough AI efficiency engine. My system, my code. The giant screen behind him lit up with my architecture, my syntax, my algorithm, even the same color-coded flowchart I'd built for our investor deck 2 years ago. I could almost hear him reciting the pitch we'd practiced together, except now it was his voice, his name. Adam paused for applause and said something that made my stomach twist. Innovation isn't just intelligence, it's courage to lead. Lead? He'd stabbed me in the back and called it leadership. My old coworkers filled the front rows, clapping like their paychecks depended on it. Maybe they did. I caught sight of one of them, Jared, the data analyst, holding up his phone to record. I remembered how he used to come to me for every technical problem. Now he was smiling like Adam was the Messiah. By the time the event ended, Twitter had crowned Adam Crane America's next tech giant. Articles appeared within hours. Forbes, Tech Insider, Wired. Headlines praised his original algorithmic genius. Intriku. I scrolled through hundreds of comments, each one stabbing deeper than the last. I didn't eat, didn't move. I just sat there replaying the live stream until the room went dark except for the blue glow of the screen. It wasn't jealousy, it was something colder, the realization that the world didn't care about who built things. It only cared about who owned the story. I closed the laptop and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed on the table. Unknown sender. I ignored it. It buzzed again. One new email. No subject line. I opened it. A single sentence sat in the center of the screen. If you want proof, meet me tomorrow, 8 p.m., downtown garage. I read it twice. Then again, no name. No signature. No attachment. Just that line. The timestamp matched the end of the ceremony, as if someone had been waiting for the applause to die before reaching out. Outside, sirens echoed through the night. The city felt heavier, as if it knew something I didn't. I set the phone down, pulse racing. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe it was real. Either way, tomorrow at 8, I'd find out. Betrayal looks different when it wears your company ID. I arrived at the downtown parking garage early, the kind of place where sound echoes too long and shadows feel alive. The only car parked on level 3 was an old silver sedan with a cracked taillight. A man sat inside, head down, scrolling his phone. When he stepped out, I recognized him immediately, Lucas Dean, one of the developers I'd trained myself. Quiet, reliable, the kind of guy who never stayed past 6. The last person I'd expect to risk meeting me like this. He kept his hood up, glancing around nervously. "You shouldn't have come," he muttered. "You're the one who emailed me," I said. Lucas looked me over, almost guilty. "Yeah, because someone had to tell you what's happening." He opened his laptop on the trunk of his car, the blue light reflecting off the concrete. Folders filled the screen. Crane Tech archives, version histories, system builds. My system. "These are your files," he said. "Your commits. The timestamp logs are still there, but they've started deleting them." He scrolled to one directory marked V0. 9. Hale build. The timestamps match the months before my firing. My initials are in every comment line, my code structure untouched. It was the proof I'd been praying for. "How did you get these?" I asked, heart pounding. He hesitated. "You think you were the only one Adam used?" "He's done this before. Took ideas, took credit. I thought maybe. If someone finally fights back." He trailed off. The look in his eyes wasn't bravery. It was fear. "They're wiping the servers tomorrow," he said. "The internal audit starts Monday, and Adam's already ordered a purge. If you want to prove this is yours, back it up tonight." I copied everything onto a portable drive, my fingers trembling as the progress bar filled. It felt like stealing from myself. Before I left, Lucas caught my arm. "Ryan, don't trust anyone who worked there, not even the ones who liked you. Especially not HR." I nodded. "Why are you helping me?" He gave a sad little smile. "Because I believed in what you built, and now I'm watching them destroy it." The words hit harder than I expected. I told him to get out before someone noticed the breach. He just nodded and slipped back into the shadows of the garage, swallowed by the hum of the city above. I drove home fast, headlights cutting through the drizzle. My thoughts ran faster: evidence, leverage, and revenge. For the first time, I had something solid, something that could make Adam answer for what he'd done. When I reached my apartment, I climbed the stairs 2 at a time, clutching the door like a lifeline. My key scraped the lock, but the door drifted open before I turned it. A cold draft brushed my face. The lights were on, and my stomach dropped when I saw the faint muddy footprint just past the doorway. Someone had been inside, and maybe they still were. They didn't just fire me. They made me the villain. When I pushed open the half-open door, red and blue lights filled my living room. 2 officers stood by the window, gloves on, rifling through my laptop bag. The third turned when he saw me. "Ryan Hale?" "Yes, what's going on?" A folded paper was pressed into my hand. "Search warrant. Corporate data theft. Possible violation of federal trade secrets law." I laughed, the kind that comes from disbelief more than humor. "That's impossible. I'm the one who built the system." The officer didn't blink. "Then you already know what we're looking for." They found exactly what they came for: a drive labeled Crane Tech Internal, confidential, tucked inside my backpack. I hadn't put it there. I hadn't even seen it before. One officer read the label out loud while the other took photos. My stomach sank. Someone had planted it. Within hours, I was sitting in an interrogation room, the hum of a vending machine filling the silence. A corporate lawyer representing Crane Tech arrived with a folder thick enough to crush me. He slid it across the table. "Mr. Crane alleges you stole proprietary data after your termination. You attempted to blackmail him with internal code." I stared at the man. "That's a lie." He smiled like that was the point. "Then you'll have no problem proving it in court." When they finally released me, my phone was full of missed calls from Emily. She met me outside the station, eyes wide, voice shaking. "Ryan, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything," I said. "They set me up." She looked away. "I can't be part of this. My job, my family, you need to fix this on your own." Her words hit harder than the arrest. She got in her car, and the taillights disappeared into the night. By the time I reached my apartment, the police tape fluttered in the hallway like a warning. My laptop was gone, my hard drives seized. Everything I could use to prove the truth was now in someone else's hands. I called the only lawyer I knew, an old college friend who handled small claims work. He listened for 10 minutes before sighing. "Ryan, these people have $1 million counsel. You can't win this. Settle or walk away." "Walk away from my life?" He didn't answer. Just muttered that his retainer wouldn't cover something this size and hung up. I sat there in the dark, the city noise filtering through cracked blinds, realizing how quickly a story can be rewritten. I wasn't the innovator anymore. I was the criminal. Then my phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. A man's voice came through, rough but certain. "I know what they did to you," he said, "and I can prove it." Static filled the line for a heartbeat before it clicked off. I stared at the phone, pulse hammering. Whoever he was, he'd just lit the fuse. Some people chase justice. Others hunt it. Daniel Reeve looked nothing like a lawyer. When he walked into the diner where we'd agreed to meet, I thought he was a mechanic. Faded jeans, leather jacket, a week's worth of stubble, and eyes that had seen more boardrooms than they'd ever wanted to. He slid into the booth across from me, tossed a file onto the table, and said, "You got railroaded, Hale." I didn't ask how he knew my name. I just stared at the folder, Cranetech's logo stamped in the corner. "You used to work for them?" I asked. "Worse," he said. "I used to make people like you disappear." Daniel Reeve, ex-corporate counsel, was fired 3 years ago after blowing the whistle on a client's embezzlement scheme. His reputation was a mix of brilliance and destruction. He'd built his career defending billion-dollar companies, then burned it down, exposing one. "I read your case," he said, sipping his coffee. "Cranetech's valuation makes no sense. They went from $2 million to $200 million in under a year. Nobody does that clean." "So you believe me," I said. He gave a half smile. "Believing you's easy. Proving you's hell." He opened the folder and slid over a printout from Cranetech's investor prospectus. Their growth's based on one product, your AI system. Every major contract ties back to that code. You're not just the guy they fired, you're the guy holding their entire empire together. I felt the words settle in my chest like a fuse waiting for a spark. "I can't afford you," I said finally. Daniel waved it off. "I'm not here for money. I'm here for revenge." That caught me off guard. He leaned closer, voice low. "Adam Crane blackballed me too. I tried to expose him once, but he buried me under lawsuits. But now, we hit him where it hurts, in court, with his own stolen code. It sounded insane. It also sounded like the first real chance I'd had in months. He told me he'd take the case on contingency. If we won, he'd get a percentage. If we lost, I owed nothing. Why risk it? I asked. Because corruption only gets boring when you stop fighting back. He started asking questions, details about my code, my timestamps, and my old project servers. I told him about Lucas, about the version history, about the files I'd backed up. He listened without interrupting, tapping a pen against the table like he was already drafting arguments in his head. Finally, he said, "They made one mistake." I frowned. "Which one?" He pulled a notepad from his jacket, sketching a rough outline of my algorithm structure. Every system has a digital signature, unique metadata embedded in its DNA. If they copied your code wholesale, that signature's still there. "We can prove it's yours." He leaned back, satisfied. They cleaned up everything they thought mattered. Deleted logs, forged papers, planted evidence. He paused, eyes glinting. "But they left your name in the algorithm's DNA." The diner noise faded around us. For the first time since the day I was fired, I felt something other than anger. Hope. Every thief leaves fingerprints even in code. Daniel's office looked nothing like the clean white walls of corporate law firms. It was chaos that somehow made sense. Stacks of hard drives, scattered legal pads, and a whiteboard full of arrows and half-erased formulas. He'd converted an old auto repair shop into his war room, and tonight it was the battlefield where we'd try to reclaim my life. We had 3 laptops open, each running a different version of the system archives Lucas had smuggled out before he disappeared. The files were old, incomplete, but they were mine. Every script carried my rhythm, my syntax quirks, my variable names, the habits that no algorithm could fake. Daniel leaned forward, glasses perched on the edge of his nose. "We're looking for metadata, timestamps, digital fingerprints. Something buried too deep for them to clean." Hours passed. We sifted through lines of logic, debug notes, and iteration histories. I recognized my old comments, jokes I'd written to keep myself sane during 2 a.m. builds. Then Daniel froze. "Hold up, scroll back." I followed his finger to a block of encoded text in the architecture's core. At first glance, it looked random, a string of hexadecimal data. But the pattern felt familiar. "Check this hash," Daniel said. He ran a trace command, pulling up the comet origin. There it was, my GitHub username embedded in the root metadata. The system I'd written automatically stamped every compile version with a contributor ID for internal tracking. It wasn't supposed to show outside our dev environment, but it had survived. He stared at the screen, grinning. "This is your fingerprint, Ryan. They didn't just copy your code. They cloned your repository. The DNA's intact." The room went still. I stared at the screen, pulse racing. Years of work reduced to this. Proof that I wasn't delusional, that my creation still remembered me even if everyone else forgot. I whispered, "So we can prove ownership?" Daniel nodded slowly. "If we can get it admitted, we'll need a forensic recovery order, court-supervised access to Cranetech's production servers. That's where the untouched version lives." It sounded impossible. A judge would have to believe we had cause before letting us dig into a billion-dollar company's back-end. But Daniel was already preparing for war, his mind 3 steps ahead. He opened his laptop and started drafting the motion. "This is how we turn the tables. If they block us, they look guilty. If they let us in, we find everything they tried to hide. By sunrise, we had a case outline, affidavits, and a filing ready for submission. I'd been awake for 30 hours, but adrenaline kept me steady. For the first time, the truth felt within reach. We left the office with hard drives packed, heading straight to the courthouse. The clerk stamped our request for forensic discovery at 9:02 a.m. sharp. At 9:14, Daniel's phone buzzed. He frowned at the screen, then handed it to me. A legal email from Cranetech's counsel. Subject line: immediate cease and desist order regarding unlawful data possession. Attached: a threat of injunction and criminal contempt if we proceeded. Daniel let out a low whistle. "They're scared." I stared at the screen, my reflection ghosted over the words. "They should be," I said, because the ghost in their code had just started to wake up. When you're poor and right, the world still bets on the rich. The moment Daniel filed our case, the war began. It didn't start in the courtroom. It started online. Overnight, Adam Crane's media machine spun its web, painting me as the unhinged ex-employee trying to extort his former company. Tech blogs ran headlines like "Disgruntled Engineer Goes Rogue" and "Cranetech Victim of False IP Claim." Everywhere I looked, my name was poison. Recruiters stopped calling. Companies that had shown interest in my resume suddenly went in another direction. My savings vanished faster than my reputation. Rent, bills, legal fees, it was all slipping through my fingers. Meanwhile, Adam was on CNBC talking about innovation, about loyalty in the workplace, smiling like the betrayal had never happened. Daniel called it psychological warfare. "They're trying to starve you into surrender," he said, slamming a newspaper onto the table. The headline read, "Cranetech Soars Amid Legal Distraction." He wasn't wrong. Adam's lawyers buried us under motions and paperwork. Each one was designed to stall, to drain what little energy I had left. Daniel's office looked like a battlefield of binders and coffee cups. He worked through nights, muttering case law like a soldier loading bullets. "They'll settle when they see you're serious," he said. But the settlement never came. Instead, a new wave hit. An anonymous insider leaked a false story claiming I'd stolen company laptops before being fired. Every tech journalist picked it up. I started getting messages from old coworkers. Some supportive, most distant. Even Emily texted once. "You should stop before they ruin you completely." I wanted to tell her they already had. Days bled into weeks. Daniel stayed sharp, but I could see the cracks forming. The case was eating both of us alive. Every time we submitted a filing, Adam's lawyers countered with 3 more. Then one night, Daniel's assistant burst into his office. "You need to see this." She pulled up Cranetech's investor report. 2 board members had resigned, and the company's quarterly earnings were under investigation. The story was finally turning. "This is it," I said. "They're scared." Daniel didn't smile. He just rubbed his temple. "They're cornered. That makes them dangerous." That night, I tried calling Lucas, the one man who'd risked his job to help me. No answer. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. The next morning, I texted him. "You okay? Need to talk." No response. By evening, his number had been disconnected. I drove to his apartment complex on the east side. The landlord stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "He moved out," he said. No notice. Some guys came by, helped him pack, said he got a new job out of state. My stomach turned. Lucas wasn't the type to just vanish. Back at Daniel's office, I told him what happened. He didn't look surprised. "They paid him off," he said quietly. Or scared him worse. The weight of it sank in. The one person who could back my story had disappeared. Outside, thunder rolled across the city, the kind that rattled windows and nerves alike. Daniel looked at me, his voice steady but grim. "Welcome to corporate war, Ryan. This is where they stop playing fair." Whistleblowers don't vanish. They're erased. Lucas's disappearance gnawed at me like unfinished code. The man who had risked everything to help me was suddenly gone. His apartment stripped clean, mailbox empty, phone disconnected. The landlord said he'd moved suddenly, but his tone carried more confusion than certainty. "He left 2 nights ago," the man said, scratching his beard. 2 guys showed up with a truck, said they were from his new company. Paid cash for the remaining rent. Cash. That one word tightened something in my chest. Lucas didn't have cash. He was barely scraping by like the rest of us. When I told Daniel, he leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. "Hush money," he muttered. Classic play. He turned to his monitor, fingers flying across the keyboard. Daniel had contacts buried deep, old IT friends, private investigators, people who owed him favors from his corporate days. Within hours, he'd pulled up a list of Crane Tech's most recent expenditures. "There," he said, pointing to the screen. Multiple transactions in the last 2 weeks, each labeled consultant fees. Large sums, all withdrawn in cash. No vendor names. No receipts. Enough to buy silence, Daniel said. Or relocation. I stared at the monitor. "You think they paid him off?" He hesitated. If they didn't, they made him disappear another way. The weight of those words hung between us. I thought about Lucas's nervous voice that night in the garage, about the look in his eyes when he said, "Don't trust anyone." He must have known this was coming. Daniel's office felt smaller suddenly, the hum of the server fan too loud. "We need to find proof he didn't just walk away," I said. Daniel nodded and cracked his knuckles. "Then we go digging where they think we won't." He pulled out a hard drive from his drawer, a mirror image of Crane Tech's public documentation site that his assistant had quietly scraped during discovery. Thousands of internal memos, progress reports, and archived meeting notes. All legally gray, but ethically right. We spent hours scrolling through project logs, release drafts, and QA updates. At 2 a.m., after hundreds of files, Daniel froze mid-scroll. "Wait, what's that?" He opened a short memo buried in a folder titled Internal Security. Restricted. The file was dated the week I was fired. No signature, just an internal note. Contain H before release. Timeline critical. Risk of exposure increases with delay. Daniel leaned forward. "H, that's you, Ryan. Hale." The blood drained from my face. "Contain me? What does that even mean?" He rubbed his jaw. "It means you were the risk, not the product. They knew you'd catch on. This wasn't a firing. It was premeditated." I looked at the monitor, that one word, contain, burning into my brain. All at once, everything clicked. The fake warrant, the planted drive, the silence from Lucas. This wasn't paranoia. It was a strategy. Daniel exhaled slowly. "We've got them cornered now. But they'll hit back." I stared at the screen, my reflection ghosting over the text. "Then let them." Because if Crane Tech wanted to contain me, they were about to find out I'd already escaped. If they want silence, make noise. That became my new rule. The courts were slow, the system rigged, and Adam's PR machine had buried me under a mountain of lies. Every article painted me as bitter, unstable, and desperate. But I still had one weapon left, truth. So I decided to turn the volume up. It was nearly midnight when I opened my laptop and logged into an old developer forum under my forgotten alias, Ghostmaker. Back before Hale systems even existed, I used to post code snippets there for feedback. Nobody knew my real name. Nobody would trace it back to me. I uploaded a small segment of the original algorithm, just enough to prove authorship, nothing that could be monetized or stolen again. Beneath it, I wrote one line. Funny how billion-dollar companies forget where their code comes from. I hit upload, heart hammering. Within an hour, the post was trending. By morning, it had exploded. Thousands of comments from engineers around the world picking apart the snippet, recognizing its brilliance, debating its origin. Some said they'd seen similar logic patterns in CraneTech's newly patented system. Tech media caught on fast. Articles appeared on every major blog. Did CraneTech steal its code? The mystery behind the Ghostmaker algorithm. Reporters speculated about whistleblowers and stolen innovations. By noon, CraneTech's stock dropped 8%. Investors demanded statements. Adam's smiling face vanished from every talk show overnight. Daniel called, half laughing, half terrified. "You just threw a grenade into their boardroom." "It's about time they heard the blast," I said. For a few glorious hours, I felt something close to peace. The truth was out there, breathing on its own, no longer locked behind non-disclosure agreements or fear. I walked downtown that afternoon and saw a headline flashing on a cafe TV. CraneTech under scrutiny amid code leak allegations. People inside were actually talking about it, wondering who Ghostmaker was. Some even called me a hero. I almost smiled. Then I got home. The apartment felt too quiet. I tossed my keys on the counter and noticed an envelope taped to my front door. Plain white. No stamp, no handwriting. Just a single sheet inside. A legal notice from CraneTech's counsel. Cease, unauthorized disclosure of proprietary information. Immediate legal action pending. But that wasn't what made my hands shake. Behind the letter was a photograph. My house, taken from across the street. My car is in the driveway, my curtains drawn. No note, no signature. Just the image, clear, deliberate, and cold. I stepped outside, scanning the street. The air was still, heavy. A car idled half a block away, headlights off. I couldn't make out the driver. Daniel's voice echoed in my head. "They're cornered. That makes them dangerous." I tore the photo in half and locked the door. The fear was real, but so was the fury. If they thought they could scare me quiet, they'd forgotten what I'd built my career on. Systems adapt. And I wasn't done evolving yet. Courtrooms smell like cold coffee and broken promises. The trial began on a gray Monday morning, the kind that feels like the world's holding its breath. I sat beside Daniel at the plaintiff's table, the wood polished so perfectly that my reflection looked like a man pretending to be confident. Across the room, Adam Crane walked in, surrounded by 3 attorneys from one of the top corporate law firms in the country. Cameras flashed from the hallway. He wore that same practiced grin he'd used at every press conference, the one that said, "I'm untouchable." Daniel leaned toward me and muttered, "Let him enjoy it. He doesn't know how fast we're about to burn his empire down." The courtroom filled with journalists, curious tech workers, and even a few of my old co-workers pretending they were just there to observe. When the judge entered, everyone rose, the air heavy with tension. Then came the opening statements. Adam's lead attorney, a tall man with silver hair and a voice designed for television, painted me as a disgruntled ex-employee seeking attention. He called me unstable, vindictive, and financially motivated. Each word landed like a slap, but I didn't flinch. When it was Daniel's turn, he stood without notes. His voice was steady, low, the kind that made people lean in. He didn't talk about money or revenge. He talked about creation, about how I'd built something out of nothing, how innovation meant risk and late nights and trust. Trust that Adam Crane had violated. By the time he finished, the room was silent. Even the judge seemed to pause. Then it was my turn. I took the stand, palms sweating, pulse drumming in my ears. Daniel guided me through the story of how the idea began, the nights spent coding, and the moment I was fired. Every detail felt like reliving a wound, but I told it anyway. The jury watched closely, eyes flicking between me and Adam. When Daniel projected the evidence, timestamps, internal emails, and screenshots of code commits, something shifted in the room. My name was right there, digitally burned into every iteration of the system. One juror actually smiled. But Adam's lawyers weren't finished. When cross-examination came, they went for blood. They accused me of leaking company secrets online, of blackmail, of manipulating evidence. I answered every question as calmly as I could, but each accusation dug a little deeper. Then, near the end of the day, Adam's lead attorney stood again. His tone was almost casual, like he'd been waiting for dessert after a long meal. "Your Honor," he said, "the defense would like to submit new evidence, a document signed by Mr. Hale releasing all intellectual property rights to Hale Systems as a part of his employment contract." Daniel's head snapped up. "That document doesn't exist," he whispered. But it did, at least on paper. The attorney handed a folder to the judge, and I caught a glimpse of it. My name, my signature. The blood drained from my face. It was dated 2 weeks before my firing. The judge announced we'd reconvene the next morning to review the new exhibit. As we left the courtroom, Daniel's jaw was tight, his voice low. "If that's real, we're dead. If it's fake, they just handed us the bullet we need." I didn't sleep that night, because tomorrow the battle for my name would either end or finally begin. I never signed that paper. But someone did, using my name. The next morning, the courtroom was packed again. A living pressure cooker of whispers and camera clicks. Daniel spread the so-called waiver across the table, eyes narrowing as he studied it. He didn't speak for a long time. His silence said more than words ever could. Finally, he pointed. "See that? The tail on your R is missing. You always loop it back. And look here, month, day, year format. You write it day, month, year." He looked up at me, expression flat but furious. "This isn't your signature. It's a digital composite." When the hearing began, Daniel wasted no time. He requested a forensic review of the document. The defense objected, of course, claiming authenticity. The judge hesitated, then granted a recess to examine the evidence. Back in the side room, Daniel called in a handwriting expert, a quiet woman named Dr. Meredith Holt. She carried a magnifier, a stylus, and calm confidence that only years of testifying could build. Within minutes, she began outlining the inconsistencies. "Look at the stroke width," she said, tracing over the print. The signature wasn't penned. It was vectorized, digitally drawn, not written. And these compression artifacts, they indicate the base file was generated months after the original paper stock was printed. The defense's junior attorney shifted in his seat. Meredith wasn't done. She pulled out a USB stick and displayed the document's metadata on a courtroom monitor. "Created date," she said, tapping the timestamp, "is 6 months after Mr. Hale's termination. Modified 2 weeks ago." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Reporters scribbled notes. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Are you asserting this document is forged?" Dr. Holt nodded calmly. "Digitally manufactured. You can copy a man's name, but you can't mimic time." Adam's lead lawyer objected, claiming software error. But even he couldn't hide the sweat gathering at his collar. Adam sat stiff, jaw clenched, knuckles white. For the first time, his mask cracked. Daniel approached the bench with quiet satisfaction. "Your Honor, this so-called waiver was created half a year after my client was escorted out of his office. We'll verify the document's original metadata registry. The defense has not only fabricated evidence, they've attempted to mislead this court." The judge didn't respond right away. She simply nodded and called a short recess to review the new findings. When we returned, the courtroom felt different, tense, waiting. Dr. Holt took the stand formally, walking the jury through every tiny discrepancy. The stroke pattern, the pixel inconsistencies, the printer marks. Her conclusion was clear. This document is not authentic. It was digitally assembled from fragments of Mr. Hale's older paperwork and redated using image editing software. Gasps spread across the benches. Cameras clicked again, faster this time. Daniel leaned over and whispered, "They just perjured themselves. The moment that file hit the record, they crossed a line they can't walk back." I glanced at Adam. He avoided my eyes, staring at the table. tapping his finger against the fake signature that had just detonated his credibility. The judge's gavel struck once, sharp as thunder. Court will reconvene tomorrow. The witness testimony stands. The bailiff's voice echoed through the chamber, but all I could hear was Daniel's whisper beside me. They forged your name, Ryan. Now we'll make them wish they hadn't. Lies fall apart faster under oath. The next morning, the courtroom buzzed louder than ever. News outlets had already run the headline, "Forgery Scandal Shakes Crane Tech Trial." Adam arrived looking smaller somehow, though his lawyers tried to puff him back up with confidence. But there was a tremor in the air, the kind that meant something was about to crack. Daniel shuffled papers at our table, calm as a surgeon before an operation. "They're going to bring someone big today," he whispered. "They need a distraction from that forged document. They're desperate." He was right. Halfway through the session, the defense called their next witness. The bailiff opened the side door, and my heart stopped. Lucas. He looked thinner, tired, and wearing a suit that didn't quite fit. I hadn't seen him since he vanished. My pulse quickened as he took the oath, eyes down, voice trembling. The defense attorney's tone was smooth and rehearsed. "Mr. Dean, you were a software engineer at Crane Tech during Mr. Hale's employment, correct?" "Yes." "And did you at any point assist Mr. Hale in accessing company files after his termination?" Lucas hesitated. The pause was long enough for the judge to glance up. They gave him some archived data. The defense attorney smiled like he'd caught prey. "So you helped him steal intellectual property?" Lucas looked up for the first time, straight at me. "No, I helped him keep what was already his." A ripple ran through the courtroom. Adam shifted in his seat. The defense attorney tried to press him, voice rising. "You were compensated for your silence, weren't you?" "Crane Tech paid you." Lucas nodded slowly. "Yes. Adam Crane offered me $200,000 to stay quiet." Gasps filled the room. Cameras clicked like machine guns. The judge had to rap her gavel for silence. Daniel stood immediately. "Your Honor, we'd like to enter that statement into the record." Lucas continued, his voice steadier now. "But I kept copies. Everything. Version logs, development notes, investor communications. I knew one day the truth would need to surface." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver USB drive. The bailiff took it and handed it to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. The room went utterly still. "On this drive," Lucas said, "are internal Slack exports, emails, and memo drafts from Adam Crane and his team. They prove that the software's original architecture was developed by Ryan Hale, not Crane Tech." Daniel turned toward me, jaw tight but eyes gleaming. We both knew this was the break. The judge ordered a brief review. Daniel's assistant loaded the files onto the evidence screen. A series of internal messages appeared, time-stamped and authenticated. The first one hit like a hammer. From Adam Crane to Board of Directors. Subject, Investor Update, Hale's Codeworks. We just need him out of the way. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Even the reporters stopped typing for a second. Adam's face drained of color. His lawyers scrambled, objecting, shouting about context and incomplete data. The judge overruled, demanding silence. Daniel leaned close to me, voice a whisper sharpened by victory. "There's your smoking gun." The crowd was still buzzing when the judge adjourned for the day. Adam stormed out through the side door, his lawyers chasing after him. I stayed seated, heart pounding, barely breathing. The weight of 5 years of betrayal began to shift, just slightly, off my shoulders. But the war wasn't over yet, because what came next wasn't just proof. It was payback. When power falls, it doesn't go quietly. By the time Adam Crane took the stand, the courtroom had already turned into a stage. Reporters lined the back rows. Cameras clicked every time he blinked. He adjusted his tie, forced a smile, and swore to tell the truth. Everyone in that room already knew he wouldn't. Daniel began gently, the way a hunter circles before the strike. "Mr. Crane," he said, "you claim Mr. Hale contributed nothing to the development of your company's AI system?" Adam nodded confidently. "Correct." His role was supportive. He was never a lead architect. Daniel tilted his head. "Interesting. Because your own emails suggest otherwise." He clicked his remote, and the projector lit up the wall with a sequence of emails recovered from Lucas's drive. Messages signed by Adam himself, praising my architecture, attaching my prototypes. The room hummed with tension. Adam's lawyers objected, but the judge overruled. Daniel didn't stop there. You also claim you personally dictated much of the code. That's your testimony? Yes, Adam said. My input was crucial to its framework. Then let's have the jury see that in action. Daniel nodded toward the technician. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as a video appeared on screen, footage from Cranetech's internal training sessions. There was Adam, standing before a group of interns, pacing like a general before battle. The audio was clear. Start a new branch using Hale's core logic. Keep the timestamps clean. Don't leave his comments in. My name, said casually like it was property. Gasps filled the courtroom. Adam's jaw dropped. His attorneys froze, unsure whether to shout or stay silent. Daniel paused the video and looked back at the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, you just heard him confirm the origin of that code. Hale's logic. Hale's comments. Hale's work. The silence after that was electric. Then the first alert popped up on a reporter's phone, and within seconds, others followed. Cranetech's stock was crashing live. Investors were pulling out faster than the ticker could update. A company once valued at $220 million was hemorrhaging value right in front of us. Daniel leaned back in his chair, whispering, "Watch this. It's not just a trial anymore, it's an execution." Adam's composure cracked. He snapped at the questions, voice rising. You think this changes anything? He worked for me. The code belonged to the company. Daniel rose slowly. Then why forge a waiver 6 months after firing him? Why pay off a witness? Why try to erase his name from your system? Adam slammed his hand on the witness stand. The gavel banged immediately, the judge warning him to calm down. But it was too late. The jury had already seen what kind of man he was. He turned toward me, face red, eyes wild. "You'll never get a dime," he shouted, voice echoing through the marble room. Daniel didn't even look up. "We'll see what the jury thinks." The judge called for a recess as Adam's lawyers scrambled to contain him. Reporters rushed out to broadcast the chaos, their headlines already writing themselves. As I sat there watching the empire he'd built crumble in real time, I realized something. Revenge wasn't loud. It was quiet. It was the sound of truth being finally, painfully believed. And this wasn't just his collapse. It was my resurrection. Justice doesn't always wear a smile, but today it did. 7 hours. That's how long the jury deliberated. 7 hours of silence, pacing, and what-if scenarios swirling through my head. Daniel sat across from me in the empty hallway, tie loosened, coffee untouched. He didn't speak much. He didn't have to. His calm had carried me through the fire, and now we were standing in the ashes, waiting to see what rose. When the bailiff finally opened the door and called our names, the world slowed. Every sound blurred, the creak of benches, the shuffle of shoes, the faint hum of cameras outside. My heartbeat was louder than all of it. The judge entered, expression unreadable. The clerk stood, holding the envelope. I looked down at my trembling hands and tried to remember how to breathe. The jury has reached a verdict. The words hit the air like a drumbeat. On the charge of willful intellectual property theft and fraud, time froze. We find the defendant, Adam Crane, guilty. For a second, I didn't move, didn't breathe. The courtroom erupted in noise, reporters whispering, pens scratching, cameras flashing. I could barely hear it over the roaring in my ears. The judge continued, voice firm. Damages awarded to the plaintiff, Ryan Hale, $33 million. $33 million. The number didn't feel real. After years of being erased, I had been written back into the story in ink that couldn't be scrubbed out this time. Daniel clapped a hand on my shoulder, a rare smile breaking through his usual stoicism. "Told you," he whispered. "Fingerprints never lie." Across the aisle, Adam sat motionless, pale, sweat glistening at his temple. His lawyers whispered frantically, but his eyes were locked on me. Rage, shock, disbelief. All of it twisted across his face like a man watching his empire burn. The judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, this court finds sufficient evidence of obstruction of justice and submission of forged documents. The bailiff stepped forward, hand resting on his cuffs. Adam's voice cracked through the noise. "You can't do this. I built that company." Daniel leaned back, murmuring, "You built it with stolen parts." The gavel struck once, sharp and final. The sound echoed like a door closing. As Adam was led away, he turned to me one last time, his voice breaking into something between a growl and a plea. "You'll regret this, Hale." But his words meant nothing now. For the first time in years, I felt air filling my lungs without weight. I looked at Daniel, at the reporters flooding toward us, microphones flashing like strobe lights. I could barely hear the questions, something about how it felt, what I'd do next. I didn't answer. I just stood there, trying to memorize the feeling of justice settling quietly in my bones. No victory speech, no gloating, just relief, pure, clean, overdue. Outside the courthouse, the sunset hit the glass buildings of downtown Austin, turning everything gold. The city felt different now, like it had finally exhaled with me. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Because every story leaves a shadow. And Adam Crane's wasn't done haunting mine yet. Money fixes the account, not the heart. 3 months after the verdict, I was back where it all began, staring at a blank screen, ready to build again. But this time, I wasn't coding for someone else's dream. I was writing the first lines of TrueWorks AI, a company built on integrity, not exploitation. I rented a small office above a coffee shop, the kind of place where ideas hum louder than egos. I hired young engineers, college dropouts, self-taught coders, dreamers who'd been told they weren't corporate material. Every one of them reminded me of who I used to be before Adam Crane taught me how easily trust can be sold. We worked late, ate cheap takeout, and laughed like survivors who'd finally stopped running. The money was there, $33 million of legal justice, but I didn't let it buy arrogance. I bought a modest home on the edge of Austin, nothing flashy, a white Tesla, not for status but for silence, the hum of its engine a reminder that peace doesn't have to shout. One evening, as the sun dropped behind the city skyline, my phone buzzed. Emily. Her name lit the screen like a ghost I'd already buried. She sounded hesitant, almost soft. "Ryan, I saw the news. You really did it." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Once, her voice could calm me through anything. Now, it just reminded me how alone I'd been when it mattered most. "I did," I said simply. She hesitated again. "I made a mistake. I should have believed you." I smiled, not bitterly, just honestly. "We all did." She asked if we could meet. I told her I wished her well, then hung up before regret could find a way back in. Some chapters don't need sequels. Later that week, Daniel visited my new office. He leaned against the doorway, smiling in that tired, knowing way. "You could retire, you know," he said. I shrugged. "And do what? Sit still? I've got too much code left to write." He laughed. "You haven't changed." "Maybe not," I said. "But my purpose has." With part of the settlement, I started the Hale Scholarship Fund, a program for underprivileged coders, kids who couldn't afford to study but could outthink any Ivy League grad if someone just gave them a chance. Sometimes I'd visit the schools myself, watch their faces light up as they wrote their first lines of code. That was the real victory. Not the money, not the headlines, but the quiet ripple of change starting from something that once felt like ruin. One morning, I stood on the office balcony, watching the sunrise burn over the city, the air crisp and clean. I thought about Adam Crane, about every lie and every sleepless night that had led me here. They stole my idea to build an empire. I used their greed to build a future. Family can fail you. Bosses can betray you. But truth always collects its debt. If you've ever been underestimated, remember, your value isn't what they sign off. It's what you build when no one believes you. Subscribe for more stories where the underdog wins.